We begin today the Gemara towards the bottom of Gimel Amud Beis, the last two lines where it says Tanya Rab Meir Mechayev. Okay, so this is in the middle of an Inyan. It said here in the Mishnah regarding the halacha that we're speaking about here, Bezdin, that by mistake, paskin, that something which is aser is mutter, for example, forbidden fats. And in such a case, if a person did what the Bezdin said, they relied on the Bezdin, so he's potter from a carbon. So the Mishnah here said, what's if the Bezdin paskin this way? But then the Bezdin realized their mistake. And this person still went and relied on the Bezdin. So Rab Shimon said in the Mishnah that this person didn't know that Bezdin realized their mistake. He's still relying on the Bezdin. So therefore he's going to be potter if he ate this forbidden fats. But then in the Mishnah it said that Rabbi Elazar says it's a suffix. It's not clear whether it's his own personal shegig or he's still relying on the Bezdin. So here the Gemara brings a brayse where there's three opinions about this. Tanya, we learned in the brayse, Rab Meir Mechayev. Rab Meir says after the Bezdin already figured out their mistake, so this person that did the Aveda will be chayev his own carbon. We assume that he knows that the Bezdin said that it's aser, but he had his own shegig. So therefore he's chayev. But Rab Shimon poiter. However, Rab Shimon says that no, he's still potter, he's probably relying on the Bezdin. Rabbi Elazar says suffix that such a case like we had in the Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar says that it's a suffix. It's not clear why he did the Aveda. So in such a case, if it's a suffix, you bring a carbon asham toli. Shum sumchis amru, in the name of sumchis it was said about this case, toloi. This is something which is suspended. What does that mean, suspended? It sounds like also that it's a suffix. So the Gemara explains, Omer Rabbi Yechanan, asham toloi ikebenayu. This point, whether he would have to bring a asham toloi, that's the difference between Rabbi Elazar and sumchis. Rabbi Elazar is saying suffix, that this is like every other case where a person does an Aveda, and it's a suffix whether he did what he ate, for example. Did he eat forbidden fats or permitted fats? In such a case, he brings this asham toloi. Mashen came, sumchis that uses this lashon of toloi, he's saying no. That over here, it's not clear enough b'chlal to say that this person had his own shegig. It's more nighted to say, it's more probable to say that he was still relying on what the Bezdin said. The fact is that Bezdin paskin wrong about this, and punkt negate to this, you see that this person did this Aveda. So it's more likely to say that he was relying on the Bezdin to say that they said it's mutter, than to say that it was his own personal shegig. All right. So even though it's not clear, but it's not a regular kind of suffix that you could say that he would be chayev a carbon asham toli. So here the Gemara brings the explanation for the machlokes between Rabbi Elazar and Sumchis regarding this, whether I could compare it to a regular case of a suffix and bring asham toli or not. So Rabbi Zayda says, Mashal Rabbi Elazar lamad David Doime. What could I compare what Rabbi Elazar is saying regarding this case? L'adam shachal, a person that ate suffix chaylev, suffix shuman, and what he ate, it was a doubt whether it was forbidden fats or permitted, and then he finds out that he ate this and he's not sure what happened. Shemevi asham tali. In such a case, the person brings the asham tali. So what Rabbi Zayda is saying is Rabbi Elazar holds just like in that case. It's sort of a 50-50 suffix. What it is that he ate, it could be chaylev, it could be shuman. In this case as well, when this person does the aveda after Bezdin retracted from their mistake, it's also a 50-50 suffix whether the person found out or not, and will bring a nashim toli. And now the Gemara explains what are the probabilities of this person finding out that the Bezdin already retracted. So we had before two opinions. What happens in such a case when most of the tzibur did the aveda, then there's a din of par helam dovashal tzibur. So who's bringing that carbon? And that would be relevant to know how probable it is for this person to find out that the Bezdin retracted. So the Gemara explains. We had a machlokes about this. Needless to say, according to the opinion mentioned earlier, that who brings that par helam dovashal tzibur, that special carbon when the Bezdin finds out their mistake? That the tzibur, all the people, have to bring this carbon. So if so, the mefarsim of milsa, it becomes public knowledge. Everybody's contributing to bring this carbon. So in such a case, this is very probable that this person now knows that the Bezdin made a mistake, and therefore it's his own personal aveda. Even according to the opinion that says that in such a case, not everybody brings the carbon. It's only the bezdin that brings the carbon. So if so, you could argue that this is something which is not known. So it's not a 50-50 suffix. You would say it's more likely to say that this person was still following the original psak din of the bezdin, and he never had a way to find out that bezdin figured out their mistake. No, but even in such a case, Rabbi Lazar holds, if this person would only ask, they would have told him. Even if they're not collecting money from everybody, but it's likely that he heard this unusual event that Bezdin is bringing this bull as a carbon. And he should have asked, why is all of a sudden Bezdin bringing a carbon? And he would have found out, because Bezdin realized they made a mistake. So therefore, this is compared to the case of a suffix where it's a 50-50 suffix with fats, forbidden fats and permitted fats. Here as well, he has to bring an Osham Toli. That's the explanation for Rabbi Lazar. Amar Rabbi Yosi bar Ravin, v'iteimer Rabbi Yosi bar Zvida, mashal de sumches l'ma David daime. What is a good analogy to explain what sumches says? That in this case, there's no Hashem Tali. It's still likely that this person was relying on the bezdin. La'adam shehevi kaparasai ben hashmoshes. A person that has to bring a carbon chatas. When did he bring the carbon? Late in the afternoon, and it's at the time when it's ben hashmoshes, which is a suffix if it's day or it's night. So as Gemara says, Safik mi by yom. So there's a Safik if it was still by day. And then the skaper light. So then the carbon is going to atone for him. Safik mishachashecha, but it could be that it was already night, and the skaper light, that's when the carbon was brought, that it will not be a kapara for him. Because if it's brought at night for a kapara, it doesn't take effect. The carbon must be brought b'yom, by day. As the pasuk says, b'yom tzavaisai. Okay, so over here, you have a person that's chayav a carbon chatos, but now there's a suffix whether that carbon chatas was brought properly. What happens after this? She'ein mevi osham toli. He doesn't bring an osham toli for the fact that now there's a sin that he did, and there's a suffix whether he was atoned for or not. Why not? Because in this case, it's more likely to say that the carbon was accepted. Because over here, the way it sounds like Rashi is explaining this, the case is that it's not even clear b'chlal that it's ben hashmoshes. He brought it late in the afternoon. So it could be that he b'chlal brought it before ben hashmoshes. You don't know for sure ben hashmoshes. There's different opinions how long ben hashmoshes is. There's one opinion of Yosi that we paskin like, that ben hashmoshes is very, very short. So he brought the carbon late in the afternoon. Could be he brought it b'chlal by day. Even if it wasn't by day, it was ben hashmoshes, but by ben hashmoshes the suffix yom and suffix laila. So if so, it's more likely that the carbon was brought properly than not. So therefore, in such a case, it's not an equal suffix, so there's no Hashem Tali. So according to Sumchis, it's the same thing over here. It's more likely that this person did the Aveda relying on the Bezdin, not with his own personal shegig. Now here again, the Gemara explains why we say this according to both opinions about who brings that carbon when Bezdin finds out their mistake. Needless to say, according to the opinion that says, Bezdin is the one that brings this carbon when they find out. So if Bezdin is bringing it, not necessarily is it public knowledge because you're not collecting money from everybody for this. Even if it's a case that all the people have to now bring this carbon, the par helam davashal tzimur, so this should be something which becomes publicized. So shouldn't we say that the person should have realized that Bezdin made a mistake? People would tell him we're collecting money because Bezdin made a mistake and everyone did Aveda. So, but nevertheless, the hacha over here, now the Gersa here changes it. We still compare it to this case mentioned by the carbon when it was brought close to the time by Ben Hashmoshes. Why? Because Ishael lo yashkech chinish l'mishayle. Because according to Sumchis, if this person would ask, he wouldn't necessarily find someone. Maybe he didn't find anybody that explained him what's going on. We assume that this person, we see that Bezdin made a mistake regarding this Aveda, and it's pumped out Aveda that he was over on. So it's likely to say that it's because he was relying on the Bezdin and he didn't have anybody to ask about this. So therefore, in such a case, there's no Osham Toli according to Sumchis. Okay, now going back to the Mishnah, it brought other Tanoim that discussed this case. So Amalei ben Azai says to Rabbi Akiva, in the Mishnah it said that it depends this person where he was. Was he still at home or did he travel overseas? If he's at home, then we say that he could have found out the mistake that Bezdin retracted. But if you traveled overseas, so how would he find out? So then I say he probably still was relying on the Bezdin. So on the Mishnah it says, Ben Azai asks Rabbi Akiva, what's the difference if he's sitting at home or if he travels overseas? And Rabbi Akiva answers him very simple. If he's home, he should have heard and known what's going on. But if he travels overseas, how is he going to find out? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva le Ben Azai. The answer of Rabbi Akiva to Ben Azai is very simple. It seems like Ben Azai is arguing on this distinction. How could he argue on this? The Svara is so simple. Amar Rave, so Rave explains, they're not arguing in a case where the person already left town. He's already on the boat or he's somewhere else. It's a person that set out on the way, but he's still in the city. So according to Ben Azai, this person will be chayiv to bring his own personal carbon because we assume that he could hear and find out that Bezin retracted from their mistake. Because the Habib Bey say he's still near his home, even if he's not mamish in his home, but he's there in the vicinity of his home. He only set out on the way, but he's still in the city. So he should have heard that Bezin changed their mind. But according to Rabbi Akiva, he's still going to be pater, even if he didn't completely leave the city yet, because the ha'achzik b'derech, he's already traveling, so he's not speaking to people. He's on his way out, and therefore that's enough for him not to be able to find out. And we assume that he relied on the Bezdin. The Mishnah said, now this is a more general halacha regarding the par hel and dover shel tzibur, that again when Bezdin paskin with a mistake and most of Klal Yisrael did what Bezdin said, so then when Bezdin finds out you bring this special carbon. So the Mishnah said, when is this? Hoyru Bezdin laka is kol aguf. If the Bezdin, their mistake was to uproot an entire mitzvah or an entire aveda, then it doesn't apply. Only if Bezdin made a mistake regarding a detail of an aveda to say that it's mutter. Tana Rabbanon, so na Braisa we learned. The sources, it says in the pasuk v'nelam davar, that there was a davar, a concept or something that was concealed with the Bezdin. They made a mistake, but v'lo yishi akar kol mitzvah kula. Not in a case where they uprooted the entire mitzvah. Keitzad, what's the case? Like the Mishnah itself also brought examples like this. Amru, if Bezdin said, ein nida b'teira, there's no issur of a woman that's a nida. Ein Shabbos b'teira, there's no Shabbos. Ein avodas kechavim b'teira, there's no issur of serving idols. Yachal yichayavim. I would think that the Bezdin would be chayiv when they cause Klal Yisrael to then do this Aveda. Talmud Loimar, so the pasuk says, V'nelam dovar, that there's a dovar that was concealed or that they made a mistake about. V'loit shetis alim mitzvah kula. Not if they forgot the entire mitzvah, then arei lepeturin, then they'll be pater from a carbon. Aval, so what's an example where they forgot a detail of a mitzvah? Omru, if they said, Yesh nida b'teira, there is the isser of a nida. Aval, Haba al shemeres yom keneged yom, the halacha of shemeres yom keneged yom, which actually applies by a zava. Minatayra, there's days of a zava, which are 11 days out of the cycle of a woman. If she sees dam 1 day or 2 days, then she doesn't have to wait 7 days. You just wait 1 more day, and then you go to the mikveh. That's 1 day against the day of the blood that she saw, and she's tahir. So they say there's a din of nida, but this halacha of shemeres yom keneged yom, they misalim, they forgot about potter. So in such a case, you're going to be potter from again. They paskin. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's part of the. That's the mistake they made. Haba al shemeres yaim keneged shemeres yaim. That their mistake was they said that then you potter. Hey, so one example. Another example. They said yes, Shabbos b'Torah, there is Shabbos. But a person that carries on Shabbos, this malacha of carrying, they said you'll be potter. Or a third example, they said that there is avodah zarah, but one that bows down to avodah zarah, that detail they said is potter. So So in this case, when they say they remember, they know the whole mitzvah, but one detail they said you would be potter for. I would think that in such a case that you should be potter. Talmud Loimar, V'nelam davar. No, this is where the pasuk says V'nelam davar, that they forgot a detail, V'loi kol haguf, and now they forgot the entire thing. Okay, so now the Gemara explains this brayso. Omamar, what did the Tana of the brayso say? Yochol yiu peturim, that I would think that they would be potter. That's at the end of the brayso. The brayso in the beginning started off saying that I would think that if they forgot the entire mitzvah, I would think that they should be potter from a carbon there. Right, so then in the end of the brayso it says again, if they forgot a detail, I would think also that they should be potter from bringing a carbon. So the Gemara asks, if that's the case, vi b'kiyum miktsas, ubetul miktsas, peturin. If the end of the brayso it's saying that I would think to say that they remember the mitzvah, but they forgot a detail, that they would be potter of bringing this carbon, ubakir as kolagov peturin. And if they forgot the entire mitzvah, the Braisa already said in the beginning, then in such a case they're potter of a carbon. So then b'may chayavin. So then what is the Braisa suggesting to say? In what case would you be chayiv for this carbon of the par helam davar shel tzibur? So the Gemara explains, Tana hachik akashile. The Tana is actually saying as follows. He's not saying it would be potter for both cases. He was suggesting to say at the end of the Braisa, maybe davar kulam mashma. Maybe the word davar doesn't just mean a detail of the mitzvah. Maybe davar means the whole entire matter. So the opposite of what it said at the beginning of the Braisa. Maybe we should say that if you forget the whole mitzvah, then you're chayiv. But for a detail, then you're going to be potter from this carbon. So Tamad Loimar, therefore the Braisa says when it says v'nelam davar means a detail, not the whole entire mitzvah. So the Gemara explains, my mashma, where do you see this in the word davar? Why does the word davar mean a detail and not the whole entire mitzvah? Amar Olis says, because Kari Bey, the way you could read this pasuk is, v'nelam mi davar. Right, so in other words, it says in the pasuk, v'nelam davar. Right, but you could read it as if it says mi davar with a mem. Why? Because you can cut off the mem from the word v'nelam and put that mem by the word davar. And then it becomes mi davar, which means that they forgot something from the matter, from the entire mitzvah. This is in the Gemara. This is what's known as geirin or mesifin. Gemara brings this not a very common drasha. You cut off a letter from one word and you add it to another word. That's what we're doing in this case, and therefore not if you forgot the entire mitzvah. Chizki says is a different source.
How's Melam touched up then if you remove the mem? What word is left?
It's a drasha. Yeah, you have to first read it with the mem, v'nelam,
and then remove the mem.
And then remove the mem and put it to the davar. Chizki says, Amakra, the pasuk says, v'osu achas mikol mitzvahs. And in this case, that they forgot, and they did one of the mitzvahs. So it says mikol mitzvahs v'loy kol mitzvahs. Only if they did or forgot something, a detail from the mitzvahs, but not if they forgot the entire mitzvah. But the Gemara asks on that, how do you know the darshan this way? But it says mitzvah is tarti mashma. Mitzvah is a plural term. So maybe the only reason it used the mem is because since it says lashon rabim, it's saying you forgot one of the many mitzvahs, but the entire mitzvah, not a detail of that mitzvah. But Rav Nachman Yitzchak, mitzvahs ksiv. You read it, you pronounce it as mitzvah is plural, but it says mitzvahs as one mitzvah, and it says from that one mitzvah. Only then are you chayav this carbon. A third source, Rav Ashi says, Yalif, Dovar, Mizakim Mamre. You learn out Gzeir Shaveh, the word Dovar that it says here, and the word Dovar that it says by the Zakim Mamre, by that elder of a Bezdin that rebels against the Bezdin. The Chsiv Bizakim Mamre, here it says, Ki Poli Dovar, Mimcha Dovar that is, By Sasam and Dovar Shegid L'cha Yom and a smile. Do not go away from anything that you're told, from right or from left. What does it say over there? There it says min hadovar. So there it clearly says not the whole dovar, min hadovar. So ma mamre min hadovar v'le kol dovar. Over there it's only in a case where he's rebelling, he's arguing with the bezdin regarding something of a mitzvah, not if he uprooted the entire mitzvah. Af b'hoira dovar v'le kol aguf. Here as well regarding the halacha when bezdin paskin wrong to bring the carbon hell and par hell and davar shel tzibur. It's only when it's something of a mitzvah, not if they uprooted it, they forgot an entire mitzvah. Another halacha about this, Amar Rav Yudah Mashmuel, Ein Bezdin Chayavin, the Bezdin will not be chayiv in this carbon, Ad Sheyoru, Bedavar She'ein Atzadokim Moedim Bay. Unless their mistake was regarding a psakdin on something that is not a clear pasuk in the Torah, that even the tzaddikim, that only accepted what it says in their literal reading of the Torah Shabbat, and not any drushes and anything that Chazal said. So only if it's something with it which is not mefurish in the Torah that tzaddikim would agree to this. But it's something that even tzaddikim will agree to this. Then peturin, if the Bezdin made a mistake about such a matter, they'll be potter. My time, why? Because zil kri beirabu. This is something that even a child in school that's learning the pasuk in Chumash knows this, and therefore this is not a case which is a shegi, a mistake on the behalf of the Bezdin that they forgot a detail of something that's not clear in the pasuk and they forgot a drasha. It's clear in the pasuk. It's closer to a mazid, so there's no carbon in such a case. So the Gemara asks on this from what it said in the Mishnah. Tanan, what did the Mishnah say, or the Braisa rather? We're asking here from the case, from the examples that the Braisa brought. So the Braisa said, yes, nida b'tayre. The mistake of the Bezdin was, they said, yeah, there is the case of a nida, the halacha of a nida. Avol haba al shemeres yom keneged yom potter. This halacha that you see blood one day, and then the next day has to be kept not till you go to the mikveh, so that is potter. Now, as I mentioned, this is not by a nida, this is by a zava. That's what the Bezdin made a mistake about. But the question is, why does that qualify as something that they would have to bring a carbon for? According to what Shmuel said, in such a case, they should be potter, because shemeres yom keneged yom. This case that you have to wait a day, haksiv, it says clearly in the pasuk, v'safra Allah, melamed shesiferes echad la'echad. In the pasuk over there, it says that she has to count that im tarim izayve v'safra Allah. She has to count one day for the day that she saw blood, and then there's another day. So it says to count what? At least one day. You have to count one day to become Torah. So that's clearly in the pasuk. So how could this be something that the chayav a pasuk a carbon for? As the Gemara, their mistake was in a certain detail about this. The Amri, what they said is, the Bezdin's mistake was, Hara Sharia. Even in this time period that there's an Isser, but the Isser is not for Hara, which is the beginning of the contact of the relation. And if that, there's no Isser. Gemar biye hudasire. In this time period, the Isser will only be the full relation. That's was their mistake. That's not something which is mefurish in the pasuk. So therefore, there's a carbon for this. But the fact that the Isser is even for the beginning of the relation is also clear in the pasuk, because it says as mekaira hera, and he uncovered the mekaira hera is referring to this, to the beginning of the relation, and it says that it's aser. This is actually a pasuk that it says by a nida, but we learn out from there that the same applies to a zava, that even the beginning is aser, and it says this lashon clearly in the pasuk. So the Gemara says, okay, so the mistake was something else that's not clear in the pasuk. The Omri, the Bezdin Paskin, kedarka asire. In the normal way of relations, that's what's aser. Shaloi kedarka. Abnormally, sharia. That would still be allowed on this day of shemeres yom keneged yom, on that day where that it's abnormally still allowed. And that's not something which is clear in the pasuk. Frek the Gemara, but it is, because aksiv. By all that ayis, it says, mishkevei isha, it uses a plural term of mishkevei isha to say that it's going to be aser in any way, normally or abnormally. So the Gemara explains, no, so their mistake was a detail that it doesn't say, because that it's combining these 2 points here together. The Amri, what the Bezdin said, kedarka, if it's a normal relation, then aser afila hara. Then I say that it's forbidden whether fully or even just the beginning. V'shaloi kedarka, but if it's abnormally, then gemar biyo the aser, only if it's a full relation, then it's going to be aser. Aval hara, only the beginning, sharia will be allowed. That was their mistake. And that's something which it doesn't say clearly in the pasuk. It says in one place shaloi kedarka, it says in a different place hara, but to say that even by shaloi kedarka hara will also be aser, that's something that it is also, but it's not clear in the pasuk. If that's what their mistake is, then why does the Braisa give an example of this case, shemeres yom keneged yom, which is only by a zava? You could say this even regarding a nida. They made a mistake regarding the isser of a nida in this detail. Shaloi kedarka, abnormally, when it's only the beginning of the relation, hara. So we see in the lashon of the Braisa that it's speaking dafka about a zava. So there has to be something there. Ella, therefore the Gemara goes back to what it suggested before. La'olam kedarka. What we're speaking about, that the Bezdin made a mistake regarding a relation in the normal way. With the Amri, we said regarding this, it's clear in the pasuk that it's aser. But rather what they said is, hara, what's speaking about only the beginning of the relation. But now they said, hara b'shaloi kedarka. Sorry, I went up a line. Hara, they said this, that it says in the pasuk, that even the beginning of the relation is aser. That's pe'isha davahu d'chsiva. That pasuk the Gemara quoted before. Es mekaira hera, where does it say? It says it only by the isha dava, which is a nida, but not by zava. Maybe by a zava, this halacha of the beginning of the relation being aser does not apply. It doesn't say it there explicitly. That was their mistake regarding shemeres yom keneged yom, regarding the isser of the zava, the Bezdin paskin that hara would be allowed. That's not mefurish in the pasuk, so they bring a carbon for this. Or you could say the mistake of the Bezdin regarding the zava of the shemeres yom keneged yom was the Amri. They said zava lo'havya ela biyamama. The zava will only become aser to her husband if she saw blood by daytime, because the chsiv, that's the literal reading of the pasuk. Kol yemei zayva, that the daytime when she has blood flowing, but not by night. So since that's not mefurish in the pasuk, so therefore this is something that will be qualified to bring a carbon for this. Okay, so that's regarding this case of nida. Gemara goes on to the next example that it said. Tanan, it said in the Mishnah or in the Braise, yes, Shabbos b'teire. If the Bezin says that there is Shabbos, but if one carries from one domain to another on Shabbos, you'll be potter, and for this Bezin has to bring a carbon. Why? Haitzah haksive. Haitzah is the malacha that it says clearly in the pasuk that it's aser. It says leitziu masa mi bateicha. Do not carry out a package from your house on Shabbos. This is actually not a pasuk in Chumash, a pasuk in Yirmiyah, but apparently from the Gemara you see that even a pasuk that's in a Nach, in Navi, is also enough to say that it's mefurish in a pasuk that Tzaddikim will agree, and there's no carbon for this.
Because it supports the pasuk in Torah.
Yeah, correct, but it's mefurish enough. Navi is considered to be mefurish. And since the Gemara, what the Braisa meant to say is, the Omri, the mistake of the Bezin was, they said, Haitzah hu da aser. Haitzah is what's not allowed. Hachnasa, mutter. What to bring in is allowed. Because it only says in the pasuk, lo yisaitziu. V'bay same, or I could say, their mistake was, the Omri, they said, Haitzah ve'achnasa hu da asira. Both Haitzah and Achnasa are aser. Achnasa is basically identical to Haitzah. It's just the other way, coming in instead of going out. So that's also like mefurish in the pasuk. But rather what they said is, Moishit v'zayre. To hand over from one porch to another, if it's on the same side, that's not clear in the pasuk. Or v'zayrik, when you throw from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, also not clear in the pasuk. Shari, they said that that's allowed. So therefore, this is a mistake that's not clear in the pasuk. That's what the Braisa was talking about when they're chayev a carbon. The next case, Tanan, it said in the Mishnah and in the Braisa, Yesh Avedas Gechavim B'Teire, that they agreed there is a Isav Avedas Zara. Aval HaMishtach Potter, but their mistake was to bow to Avedas Zara. You would be potter. That was the mistake, so they have to bring a carbon. But why is this considered to be a case yichayev? To bow, not to bow taved zara. It says clearly the pasuk says not to bow taved zara. And so the Gemara, the Omri, their mistake was they said ki asira ishtachavoya kedarka. When is it aser? When it's bowing down to avodah zara, that's the way it's worshipped. I will shalei kedarka. But if this is not the way this avodah zara is worshipped, if, for example, if it's pa'ir or markulis, the way it's worshipped is either by relieving yourself to it or throwing rocks at it. So then sharia, they said over there, it's allowed to bow down to it. That's the mistake, because the shtachava is an isser by any avodah zara, regardless. But it's not mefurish in the pasuk. Or I can say their mistake was the omri shtachava guf regarding bowing down kedarka hudaser. Only if you bow down fully, where it's normally done, which is the isbe pishut yadayim v'raglayim, completely spread out on the ground with your hands and feet. That's when it's going to be aser. Ha shtachva the less by pishut yadayim v'raglayim. When one bows without completely lying down on the ground, sharia, then it was allowed. That was their mistake, only regarding the detail of the shtachvaya, which is not mefurish in the pasuk. Dr. Gemara Bayer Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef had the following shaila: Ein charisha b'Shabbos. If the mistake of the Bezdin was, they said that there is no malacha of plowing on Shabbos. What are the lavates malachas? Mahu. What's going to be the halacha in this case? Will I say, since they are agreeing that there is Shabbos, their mistake was regarding one malacha, so that's kibitl mikzas, v'kiyah mikzas dami. That qualifies what we said before, that only in a case where they agreed to the mitzvah and they were mevatel a little, then they're chayiv. And this as well. They agree, they're maida in Shabbos. Or I could say, because this malacha, they're completely uprooting this malacha, so kol ikr, completely ka'akiras guf dami. This is considered to be like the uprooting an entire aveda altogether. Only if they would say, for example, that a certain way of charisha is allowed. This is allowed, that's not. But they uprooted the whole charisha. Maybe that should be something which is uprooting the whole thing, and there's no carbon for this. The Rishonim here point out that this example of charisha the Gemara gives is not meduyik, because charisha happens to also be one of the lamates malachis, which is mefurish in the pasuk. And we just said before, something that's mefurish in the pasuk, that they said is mutter, there's no carbon for. It's just using charisha as an example because it's the first of the lamates malachis, but it means one of the other ones, which is not mefurish in the pasuk. Okay, so the Gemara brings the raya going through the same details that was mentioned in the Mishnah and the Braisa before. So Tashema, it said, Yesh nida b'tayrev. The mistake of the Bezdin was that there is a nida. Aval haba al shemeres yom keneged yom potter. But this category, this halacha of when you see blood one day and you have to wait one day against it, for that you would be potter. So now the question is, va'amai, but why would you be potter? Ha'akrin l'shemeres yom keneged yom kol iker. This scenario of a woman that sees blood one day is considered to be an entire category of tumah in itself. Just like by Shabbos, you have the different malachas. So by a zava, you have a zava of 1 day, a zava of 2 days, a zava of 3 days, and then a nida. Each is a category for itself. So over here, it's saying that the Bezdin uprooted this entirely, and you still bring a carbon. So from this, you could see that even when you uproot an entire malacha of charisha, you still bring a carbon because they still agree to Shabbos. Amalach Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says, as the Gemara already explained before, Shemeres Yom de Ka'amrin. When it says over here the Shemeres Yom, we're not talking about that they uprooted it completely. Kiddushanin, as we already explained before, that it was only regarding a detail of this Isser, regarding Hara, the beginning of a relation, or by night, if you saw blood by night and not by day, but not if you uprooted the entire Shemeres Yom. Similar, the Gemara goes through the same thing after other things here. Toshama, it said in the Mishnah, Yesh Shabbos b'Torah. The Bezdin says this Shabbos. But if you carry, you'll be potter. So over here, that's a full malacha. A full malacha that the Bezdin is saying is going to be mutter. So why would this case be mutter? They uproot this malacha completely. So that proves that this is still considered to be oiker mikzas and they're Maida Miktas and Oiker Miktas. Answers the Gemara now. Hasanami Kedushanan. We already explained before that we're not talking about that. They didn't say that it's mutter to carry. It was only to throw or to hand over or maybe achnasa. Hashama Yesh Avedas Gechaven B'Torah Aval Mishtach VePotter. The Bezdin says that there is a Yisur of Avedas Zarah but not to bow. But V'amai V'Akrin L'Shtachava Kol Iker. This category of Avedas Zarah to bow down, they're uprooting this completely. So Amri. So the answer is here as well. Ishtachva Namik Kedushanan. We already answered before that the Ishtachva we're talking about is not the complete Indian of Ishtachva. Rather, it's only by Pa'ira Markulis or only a certain type of Ishtachva. Not if it's an incomplete Ishtachva. That's the mistake. So therefore, there's no raya to the Ibaya of Rav Yosef. Rab Zera had another shaila. How about if the mistake of the Bezdin was they said Ein Shabbos b'Shvius, that you don't have to keep Shabbos in the year of Shemitah. Mahu. What's the halacha in such a case? Now, what's the shaila here? What exactly was Bezdin's mistake? How did they make such a mistake? The mistake was in this pasuk. It says in the Torah regarding Shabbos that by Charish Bakatze Tishpais that you should refrain from plowing or reaping. So what would that mean? Bisman the Ike Shabbos. In a time when otherwise 6 days a week you are plowing, like the pasuk says in the beginning, Sheshes Yomim Tavoid. So then on Shabbos you're not allowed to do any plowing. So, but Bisman the Leke Charisha. But if it's a time period in the Shemitah when you can't be plowing every day of the week either, so then Leke Shabbos. So then there's no Isra on Shabbos. So that's their mistake. So the question is, do I say, even the Shavua, since the Bezdin is saying that there is Shabbos on all other years besides Shemitah, Kibitol Miktas, Vikia Miktas Dami. So this is a case that qualifies that they are nullifying part of this mitzvah of Shabbos and are keeping it in other years. Or do I say, since in Shemitah itself they're saying that there's no Shabbos at all, Kakiras HaGof Dami. They're uprooting the entire Shabbos in this time period of Shemitah. So therefore this doesn't qualify for the Chiyuv, for the carbon. So Ravina brings a raya, Toshama, bring you a proof from what it says by a Navi that's saying a false Nevuah. Navi a Navi that said a prophecy to uproot a mitzvah of the Torah, Chayev, then it'll be Chayev Misa for this actually. So over here actually by a Navi it's the exact opposite. A Navi that uproots only an entire mitzvah, then he's Chayev Misa. A Navi that only uproots a detail of a mitzvah, then he's not going to be Chayev Misa. Okay, so over here it's saying that the Navi that uprooted the entire mitzvah, he'll be Chayev Misa. Lebitol miktas, or lekiyah miktas, if he uprooted some of the mitzvah, and he said the other thing is you have to still fulfill, Rab Shimon says, Potter. Then in such a case, he's going to be Potter from Misa. That's regarding all mitzvahs. But now by Avodah Zarah, though, this distinction does not apply. Or by Avodas Gechavim, however, when it comes to a Navi that comes and says a prophecy that you should be serving Avodah Zarah. Over here, Philo Amar, Hayoim Oivda. Olamacha b'teila, even if he just said today sorva avodah zarah, but tomorrow not, chayiv. He will be chayiv for this. By avodah zarah, we don't make the distinction if it's fully or not. Even if only partially, he will be chayiv. So what do I see from this? Says the Gemara, Shma Mina. From this I could learn out, Ein Shabbos b'Shvius kibitl miktsas v'kiyam miktsas dami. Is that how you read it over here? Is it ein or in? Ein Shabbos b'Shvius, that Shabbos, if it's only a Shabbos in Shemitah, that they're uprooting, it's not considered to be like a bittul miktsas and a kiyam miktsas dami. I think it's saying that it is.
No Shabbos prohibition during Shvius. No Shabbos prohibition during Shvius.
One second. So we have over here the Rashi. Okay, so Shma Mina. Okay, this is how you read it. Sorry, let me go say it again. Shma Mina. So what do I learn out from here? What do you see over here in this brayso regarding avodah zarah? That the Navi said today serve avodah zarah, tomorrow not. This is the example that the brayso is bringing for a case where he's uprooting part of the avodah zarah and not uprooting it entirely. Even though he's saying today you could serve avodah zarah. So what you see from this is again Shma Mina. So from this I learn out if the Bezdin said Ein Shabbos b'Shvius, that there's no Shabbos in Shemitah, but there is Shabbos in all other years, Kibitol Miktsas, V'kiyam Miktsas Dami. That this is like a person that is, or the Bezdin is uprooting it partially and saying that partially it is good. Just like by avodah zarah. By avodah zarah, if the Bezdin said, or the Navi that is, said today serve and tomorrow not, it's considered to be like a Miktsas. That was the example of Miktsas that the Bryce is saying that by avodah zarah, he's always going to be chayiv misa. So the same thing regarding Shabbos, that if they say keep it in the rest of the years and not in Shemitah, it's like partially yes and partially no, and the Bezdin will be chayiv misa. Shma Mina, that proves a point.
So the Navi's also.
That's how you read this Gemara.
The Navi's also chayiv misa.
Yeah, only by avodah zarah. Only by avodah zarah. Sagt der Heilige Mishneh, Hayru Bezdin. If the Bezdin paskin and they made a mistake, and the Yoda Echad Mehen, one of the people of the Bezdin knew Shato, then that they're making a mistake. Vama Lahen, and he says to the Bezdin, Toyanatem, you're making a mistake about this. So in such a case, there's no carbon for this. Rashi says the reason is because it has to be the Yoiru Kulan, has to be the entire Bezdin that's saying this. Mefarshim discussed this, that Rashi says here, because the Gemara before in Daf Gimel said that it could be Rubai Kakula. It doesn't have to be necessarily the entire Bezdin. The Gemara refuted this concept. But over here, it seems like Rashi holds, in a case where there's a person that's clearly telling the Bezdin that you made a mistake, over here, that this point still applies, that there will not be a carbon for this. Before the Gemara was talking about a case where not everybody was involved. But over here, he's clearly telling the Bezdin you made a mistake, there's no carbon for this. Now, if the mufla, the greatest, the leader of the Bezdin, was not there when they paskin, then there's also no carbon for this. The Gemara will explain. In a case where not all the dayanim were qualified to be judges. If one of them was, whether a ger or a mamzer nosen, none of them are qualified to be a judge. They don't have proper yichus. Or an older person that's not fit to have children. He also can't be in a bezdin. Hareza potter, so he will be potter. In such a case, the bezdin that is will be potter from a carbon. Shanema, because Shanema can. The pasuk here, when it speaks about this carbon, it says Eidah, which refers to the bezdin. V'nem lahalon, and it also says the term Eidah. Lahalon Eidah, it says it by bezdin. It's paskening on a dinin nefashis. My Eidah hamur lahalon, just the Eidah, like the Eidah that it says there. Kulan ru'uyin lohira, it means that the entire bezdin is fit to be in the bezdin. Af Eidah hamur kan. So do the term Eidah that it says here. Ach kulan ru'uyin lohira. Only if all of them are fit to be in the bezdin. Okay, so the Gemara explains the case that it mentioned. The oldest, or not the oldest, but the leader, the smartest of the bezdin, he was not there when they passed in this halacha. Then there's no carbon for this. From where do we know this? So he explained, going back to the point that we said before. And what's the reason why you say that if Bezdin made a mistake regarding something which is clear in the pasuk, that even tzaddikim would agree? Why in such a case is there no carbon? This is not a shaygig. This is something that they should have learned and known in the pasuk. It's closer to amazit. So if so, similar we say, if the smartest, the leader of the Bezdin was not there, and they pass it, they'll be potter as well, because this is closer to amazit. Why are they rushing to paskin when the mufla is not there? They should have waited to get his agreement to their psak din. If they didn't wait, so therefore this is closer to amazit, and they'll be potter.
So why are they potter? Because
the carbon is only if it's a shaygig. Not if you see that they were hasty and they're psaked in, it's closer to amazit. For amazit, there's no carbon. So the term Eida means that they all have to be fit to be in a Bezdin. So how do we know that these individuals mentioned in the Mishnah that don't have a proper yichus are always going to be puzzled for a Bezdin? So v'hasam minalam, by a Bezdin b'chlal, from where do we know that they're puzzled to be in a Bezdin? Rav Chizda says, Amakra, the pasuk says, when Moshe Rabbeinu says in Parshas Baloischa, when Moshe Rabbeinu is bringing another 70 Zakanim to be with him, V'syatzvu sham imach, they should be standing there with you. What does the word imach mean? Imach b'day minlach. They have to be like Moshe Rabbeinu with a proper good yichus, and therefore it excludes these individuals, the ger, the nasan, and the mamzer. Now, ve'emeh, says the Gemara, maybe imach there means something else. Imach l'shchina, that they have to be with him regarding the shchina. So there's two pshatim in this. Either it means, Rashi says, one pshat, it means that they should be with you, but they should still be careful not to go inside where Moshe Rabbeinu goes in the Makim HaShchina. Or it means, Imach l'shchina means that they should be fit to receive from the Shchina. They should be tzadikim gemurim. But it doesn't mean Imach regarding the yichus. So Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, Makro, we go back to a pasuk before in Parshas Yisrael, where also there Moshe Rabbeinu made a bezdin, or he judges, like Yisrael gave him the advice. It says, "V'nosu itach," they'll carry the load with you. What is itach? Itach b'day malach. They should be with you, similar to the yichus of Moshe Rabbeinu. Then they'll be roid lohira. Rashi actually says regarding the case that the Mishnah says that if it's a zakin, that ein roi lebanim could not be in a bezdin. Rashi says, I don't know the source for this, but the Rishonim all say that in Sanhedrin it clearly says that someone that doesn't have any children, he doesn't have compassion, so therefore he's not right to be in a bezdin. So the Mefarshim say that Rashi understood when it says roi ein roi lebanim, it doesn't mean he has no children. Now at this age, he's not right to give birth anymore. And on that Rashi says if he has children, but just because he's old, he doesn't know the source of this, why he shouldn't be in a bezdin. It seems like that's how Rashi learned it. Right. That's why Rashi is saying he doesn't know a source for this. But the other Rishonim say clearly that some are even actually guided this in the Mishnah that he has no children, and it's that says clearly that he can't be in a bezdin. Okay, one more thing over here. One shtickle. Sagt the Mishnah Hayru bezdin sheigegin bezdin paskin, and they were b'sheigeg about this. They made a mistake, and then also kol sheigegin, and all the people that relied on the bezdin, so they b'sheigeg, did this Mevi'im par. So then when they find out, you bring the par Helam Davashal Sibra. However, Mizidin, if the Bezdin b'mezid was matter, something which is aser, v'asu shaygigin, and then the people that relied on the Bezdin, they did this b'shaygig. So here, this doesn't apply. Mevi'im kisbo sira. Everybody that did this aveda, they bring their own, like a regular personal chatas, which is a kisbo nasira, not the par, not the bull. Now, if the case is shaygigin, that if the bezdin is the one that made a mistake, but va'asu mizidin, the people that did this aveda, they did it b'mezid, then arei lepeturim. Then over here, the par helm davashal tzibur does not apply. So the Gemara shaygigin va'asu mizidin. The last case that the Mishnah said that the bezdin was a shaygig and the people did it b'mezid, harei lepeturim. Then the Mishnah is saying, Dafke, if all the people did it mamish, completely deliberately, then they're going to be potter. Says the Gemara, what do I see from this? Ha sheigi, dumi yedemezid. If the people were still a sheigi, but similar to mezid, meaning what means similar to mezid? That they did not rely on the bezdin. It wasn't only the mistake. that they relied on the Bezdin. There was something else that happened over here. That's what the Gemara means by Dumi de Mezid. Chayiv. Then they'll be Chayiv. And Vehechi Dami, what's this case? This is something the Gemara discussed before in Daf Beis. Shahoiru Bezdin and Shechelev Muter. Yes, the Bezdin did make the mistake and said that forbidden fats is allowed. But then, when the people went and did this, what happened? Then they also made their own mistake. They were going to eat permitted fats, and they made a mistake and ate forbidden fats. And they ate this. So over here, besides the mistake of the Bezdin, they also made their own mistake. All right, so just like by a Mezid, the Mezid is not relying on the Bezdin. So over here as well, there was an additional mistake, not only because they were relying on the Bezdin. So it's mashma, then in such a case, they'll still have to bring a carbon. Because the Mishnah says only if they're fully Mezidin, if they're fully Mezidin, then they're going to be potter. But in this kind of case, they'll still be chayiv in a carbon. So if so, Tifshat the boy Rami Bachama. This is your answer to what Rami Bachama, he had an iboya about this, as we learned before in Daf Beis. In such a case, do I still say that their mistake is because they were relying on the Bezdin, or because there was also an additional mistake that they made themselves, that they would be potter from a carbon? So the Gemara says, Amalach, the reason why Rami Bachama has his shaila and he was not paishet from here is because he'll tell you, since in the case before in the Mishnah, it uses the term mezidin, which is a full-fledged mezid, and which was the Bezdin that was a full-fledged mezid, and vasu shaygig, and the people were a shaygig. So Tana Seifa, and the Seifa where it's the opposite, it uses the same term. That shaygigin, that the Bezdin was the shaygig, vasu mezidin, and the people were a full-fledged mezid. But it's not necessarily is it only when the people were a full-fledged mezid. Even if it's a shaygig dumya de mezid, because there was an additional mistake they made, maybe even there they would also be potter from a carbon. So you can't prove it from the language of the Mishnah.